they want to harvest us for data. And like I said earlier, they want to use us as bootloaders for their digital intelligence, and they can't continue to improve and feed the AI without us doing it for them. They can't do it alone. So
But
I
but
think the
but
more we,
but
mhm.
people are not, they're not likely to leave things that make their life easier. They're just not.
Yeah, well, that's the price of convenience, isn't it? And I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the effort to enslave us has been to cajole us and influence us with convenience and comfort. But also, in theory, prison is comfortable, right? In the sense that you have a roof over your head and they bring you food. And I mean, a digital prison without walls, could be similarly comfortable, and you wouldn't have to lift a finger to fight, for your freedom. But we can still, oh, sorry, you wouldn't have to lift a finger to fight for your freedom. You would just willingly walk into the system, right? But those of us that don't want to live in the system, have to do something. And so I think we're at a crossroads, and have been for several years, where those of us that don't want to walk into this have to actively build alternatives. And if you don't have, a ton of people in your community doing that, maybe you should reach out and build awareness. But if you have people that are aware of this around you, it's important to build, I would argue, local resilient networks that don't depend on this infrastructure. There's still open source alternatives to a lot of the big tech platforms out there. And I still think I'm still hopeful that there is time. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if they're pushing us towards a post-human future, I think at some point people will realize that they don't want to lose what makes us human. And so much of what we're being pushed to use AI for are creative pursuits that help define us as human, right? Making art, making music, writing. These are the things that we're being told to outsource to artificial intelligence, not necessarily the tedious stuff, right? So what's going to be left for us when we outsource of this all to AI? Will we allow ourselves to be cognitively diminished to the point that we can't even create anymore? And then what kind of, humans are we at that point? So I think it's very important to encourage analog alternatives to that kind of stuff, and to engage in creativity. And there's a lot of opportunity for that, especially for people that have children. Children are very creative, and we need to promote that to them, instead of being like, here's a tablet, learn how to scroll by the time you're three
Right,
or four,
right, right.
and navigate the algorithms. If we do nothing and we don't shift that cultural behavior, or what's being made, common cultural behavior now, then yeah, it will be very problematic. And so I think, it's a very important time right now for parents to make sure your kids are well and anchored in the real world, and not just checked out to lunch and trusting, potentially trusting algorithms more than you. I mean, there's these efforts to have domestic robots in the house. A lot of the ads show young children developing emotional relationships with these robots,
Very
saying
bad.
"I love you," and all of this stuff. That is not good. I absolutely agree. And so, just because you want to focus on yourself or X, Y, and Z is no excuse to have, the emotional connection your child needs be built with a machine programmed by who knows who. I mean, so many of these big tech figures also had relationships to Jeffrey Epstein, a pedophile. Do you want to trust those people to program stuff that's around your kids, and talks to them, and, potentially manipulates them when you're not there? So, it's not just with that too. I mean, that is the idea of taking active responsibility for things in your life, and we need to do more of that. And culturally, Americans have been the best at that for a very long time, but there have been a lot of efforts to condition us out of that, and a lot of it has been through this effort to cultivate the importance of comfort above all else, and convenience. The idea of rugged individualism in the US, unfortunately, has been, greatly reduced. And I think it's important for us to take active responsibility, because, the pull of AI is to get for us to be passive and do nothing and just let it wash over us. And oh, you don't have to do that anymore. AI can do that, and AI can do this for you, and this and that. And if we're not focused on the things that we like to create and that we like to do, and active, we will recede. And that is how the post-human future will happen. There is still a lot of time for agency, but people just need to be really aware of what's going on and determined to change it.
Is there anything do you use AI at all for anything?
No.
Nothing. You're completely off it. You don't use it.
No, I'm uninterested in using it. It wasn't always around. I'm 35 now, and when I was in university, there was no AI. I learned how to write and do what I do now without it. So why would I need it? Especially when I'm aware that, the whole idea, if you don't use it, you lose it. So I stop, let's say, for example, a person who does work similar to me stops researching, has AI do their research for them. Well, they'll come back in a year or two and be like, wow, I kind of forgot how to do this. I don't remember how to do it anymore. It's gotten a lot harder for me, right? The same idea if you stop doing mental math because you're constantly reliant on a calculator. It gets harder. That's the idea of cognitive diminishment,
Ray Kurzweil,
as they've called it.
Ray Kurzweil told me that no, it'll just free your mind up to do other, bigger, more important things. And I didn't believe
that's not happening.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't think it would.
We can already see that's not happening. So I think people, again, need to take active control of not just their physical lives as much as possible, but their mental lives too, and have to remember that, even on big social media platforms like X, formerly Twitter, for example, they've openly said that the AI Grok is going to be running the algorithms, period, come November. So AI is inescapable in those types of environments, and we have to remember that we have to be aware that there is an effort to influence us towards these policies. And a lot of people go onto social media, assume it's the new public square, and free, that it's better for free speech now and all of that, but aren't aware that really every time you're going on these platforms, it is a cognitive battlefield. Again, this is why I really want to stress that critical thinking has never been more important. There's a reason they've tried to breed it out of the school systems in the US, and social media, ChatGPT, the chat bots, all of that are meant to further eliminate that from us. So it's never been more important to scrutinize things and go into these digital environments, realizing them for what they are. And some people get benefits from them, but some people don't necessarily anymore. And there's been a lot, even studies that have been leaked from places like Facebook, where they've manipulated your algorithms to depress you, to make you feel very negative and feel despondent, and all of that. And yeah, if we give in to those kind of emotions, then we'll just do nothing, right, to change our situation, and do nothing why we're at this crossroads that we're at, that I mentioned earlier. So there's an effort to emotionally manipulate us there as well. With they can determine what you see, and they know you're well studied because of all the data that you have generated during your time in the digital environment, and they can use that to determine exactly what type of demographic you are, exactly what you would need to see to shift your viewpoint from viewpoint A to viewpoint B. The type of manipulations they can do, they can do at a tremendous scale now with AI. And we also have to keep in mind that during the Obama administration, they lifted the ban on the use of propaganda on the domestic American population that had been in place for many decades. And a lot of people, unfortunately, forget that.